I want you to set a fire so goddamn big the gods will notice again. That's what I'm saying. I want all of you boys to be able to look me straight in the eye one more time and say, "Are we having fun or what?" Hey you, what's your name? Skank? You don't feel that? I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook. I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook. Well, boy, your mama must be damn proud of you. Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. We're your hosts, Rob and Liam, and we covered 1994's The Crow, starring Brandon Lee, directed by Alex Proyas. Hey, Liam, how's it going, mate?
Hey, how's it going? I mean, that was absolutely spectacular, and I'm so glad you started this podcast with Michael Wincott because, I mean, I don't want to say he's the true star of this film because Brandon Lee really is the star of this film, and obviously there's lots of talk about there with Brandon Lee. But last week, obviously, we did Kindergarten Cop, and a lot of talk was about Crisp and him being like the ultimate 90s bad guy. I completely forgot about the array of 90s bad guys and like the hair, the mini ponytails. I mean, Michael Wincott, I'm still not quite sure why he's called Top Dollar, but the long, straight hair, the fact that he's dressed like a Victorian villain.
The fact that it goes both sides of his shoulders, like it's that long and it's that.
That's a big part of it.
It's just that guy was enjoying that role.
Well, he has to because he is like I can't remember the guy who played Crisp, but like
Richard Tyson.
Richard Tyson, classic. But like David Patrick Kelly, who's also in this film, who has despite Top Dollar's hair, I would argue the worst haircut in movie history. With like somehow he's got like a mini bowl cut combined with a mini pony, like the tiniest little ponytail at the back. But I mean, we are talking about some David Patrick Kelly and Michael Wincott. I mean, have they played anything other than bad guys in their careers? Like anything other? I mean, if you're Michael Wincott with that voice, you're like, well, dude, I can't play a good guy, not this fucking voice. He sounds like gravel.
Even in Disney's Treasure Planet, he was a bad guy. He was that weird crab bad guy that. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. Of all his bad guy roles, you picked that one. You didn't pick like Prince of Thieves or Alien Resurrection. You picked Disney's Treasure Planet and the crab guy.
He wasn't really a bad guy in Alien Resurrection, was he? He was just a scavenger.
He was still a bit of a wrong one. I mean,
like, you could have picked the Eddie Murphy 1998 film Metro.
I could have picked that. I mean, to say that, I mean, we could argue over the semantics as to whether he's a bad guy in Alien Resurrection. I would argue he very much is. But for you to go out your way to pick Metro and Treasure Planet, and so early in the podcast, bravo, sir. Bravo.
Before we spend the rest of this podcast on Brandon Lee in this film, I do want to give credit to the fact that they took villains from West Side Story and brought them into a dark gothic superhero film like this, like comic book graphic. Because, right, aside from the mantra, fire it up, which is basically a mini dance, you have...
It is exactly that. It is a mini dance that they perform over and over again ad nauseum. It's unreal.
Starting from the top to the bottom, you have Top Dollar, T-Bird, Tintin, Funboy, and Skank.
Those are some names. Those are some fucking names to go with those goddamn haircuts.
Now, T-Bird, Tintin, I get because metal. They're not being clever with the nickname on this. This guy loves knives, metal, tin.
Yeah, but nobody's really like if he was called like aluminium or aluminum, whatever, or steel or something. I'm pretty sure you don't make knives out of tin. And it doesn't matter if you say it twice. It's a pretty lame nickname, in fairness. Of all of the, in a group of nicknames where you have Top Dollar and Skank, which are pretty lame, to be honest. But Tintin might be the worst of the bunch.
Skank carried his name, mind you. You see a guy named Skank, and you look at him and you think, yeah, that he is Skank. That's Skank.
Yeah, it fit. It's like as soon as you hear him and someone's like, "Hey, this is my friend Skank," you're like, "Yeah, of course his name's Skank. That's exactly his name."
I love David Patrick Kelly as well, T-Bird, being the cool guy. You've already mentioned his tiny little ponytail, as well as his Victorian era goatee he's got going on. Yeah. But then he was enjoying being that little with his whistle that brings all his guys to him. And stuff like that. But that cat, why is everything on that car? And I'm not a car guy, so maybe somebody could tell me this. But why is everything on that car underneath? Like the way he opens his car door, he goes down underneath and opens it from the bottom.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
the
yeah.
way he starts the engine, the key barrel is facing down, so he's got to put it up. I don't get that. What's that about?
All I could think was that, and this is maybe a bit of a push here, but when I saw this film again, and especially from its slightly dodgy, I wouldn't say CGI opening, because I'm pretty sure it's all done with models, and the fire effects are clearly done with JPEGs. They are rough. Of all the stuff which is aged poorly in this film, the fire effects are pretty goddamn bad.
It was a lot of cost cutting, wasn't it? Because they were trying to make like a $30, $50 $50 million movie on like an $18 million budget. So they
and the thing is, I mean, what they're clearly going for is the Batman vibe. Like, this is coming relatively hot off the heels of Tim Burton's '89 Batman. And if you watch this film, it obviously has a lot to answer for with this film. You know, with the gothic stylings, those shots through the city, it is quite Gotham-esque. And I know this is supposed to be set in Detroit, is it? I think.
Well, they're not actually given a city, are they? It's been a long time.
I thought I read somewhere that it was Detroit. I'm not sure if it rains this much in Detroit. I think it's based
on the actual graphic novel by James O'Barr.
Yeah.
Well, no, sorry, this is, but I'm pretty sure it's been a long time since I've read it, but it may be Detroit in the comic.
Yeah, it might be that. I mean, the only thing I could kind of in terms of a kind of comparison piece, was something like David Fincher, where he has this kind of like American city. It's never quite specifically said where it is, but it's always raining. You know, like kind of like the city in Seven. Yeah. You kind of like, you have a vague geographical idea of where the city is, but it's never made clear. And it's like, the main rule is that it's always overcast and it's always raining. So perhaps this is set in one of the David Fincher, kind of made up cities.
No, so the original Crow comic was created by Michigan native James O'Barr, who set his first storyline in Detroit. So I'm pretty sure that's where. So it's coming from the comic. So it's never actually quite mentioned in the film, but it's given that in a city vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got that vibe, but I think, again, rather than worrying, even if, like in the film, is officially set in Detroit, I don't think they're trying to sell you on this being Detroit. I think they're trying to sell you on this gothic cityscape. They're trying to do a kind of more grounded take on Gotham, where crime runs free. With like, it's not the Purge, but what's the night called? Devil's Night.
Yeah.
They're kind of playing off like, there's been 143 fires. It all leans into that. It's going for like an even darker version of Tim Burton's take on Gotham. And obviously, like, there were a lot of films which took that mantle in the subsequent, like in the early 90s, and you had stuff like The Shadow and The Phantom, but a lot of those, what they took was the 50s elements, that 50s futuristic style from Tim Burton's Batman. But this film instead is going, okay, this film is very contemporary, and when I say contemporary, it comes with an asterisk, contemporary for 1990, because it's one of the most aggressively mid-90s films you'll ever see. But it's definitely saying, all right, we're just going to take the gothic element from Batman and we're going to lean into this. And that was, long story short, why perhaps they have this like totally over, like outrageous car, because well, Batman had the Batmobile. We can't have the Crow having a car because he's a crow. So the bad guys are going to have this totally over-designed car, which I got to be honest is ridiculous, but it was kind of cool. I did kind of like it.
It was very cool. Now, there was a lot in what you just said, and we'll cover quite a bit of it. Now, the way you said the way this film looked, it could have looked a lot different if the studio got their way.
Yeah,
because they actually wanted it as a musical, and I'm not making this up. They wanted it as a musical starring Michael Jackson.
Jesus Christ, that would have been quite different.
When they told James O'Barr this, again, the creator, he laughed because he thought they were joking, but they were deadly serious, apparently. And it was only when Alex Proyas and Brandon Lee came on that they took it down this route. And I know what you're saying about the way, but again, the way this film is, it could have been drastically different.
It could have been drastic. But then I was wondering, it's like, despite the fact that some lunatic wanted to be a musical star in Michael Jackson, that I can imagine the only reason, especially back in the early 90s, where, like, you got to remember, graphic novel movies, superhero films, they weren't really a thing until, obviously, there'd been Superman in the late 70s, but that hadn't led to any kind of boom for superhero movies at all. You know, there'd been an array of like straight-to-video nonsense with like Spider-Man and stuff. But it wasn't until Batman in 89 that it started again, because obviously that was a massive hit. And it's strange because obviously, you know, after 2000 and, you know, everyone thinks X-Men, but really it was Blade that got the ball rolling in the very late 90s.
Blade, yeah.
It was like, it had this natural progression. And it's like, all right, Blade hit big, and that wasn't one of the big characters. So we're like, oh, let's try the X-Men. And the X-Men led to Spider-Man. And then it wasn't until 2007, obviously, that you end up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it was bizarre that back in like 89, that you had this massive, absolutely cultural, like it was a beast. Like Batman in 89 was an absolute cultural phenomenon. And it just didn't really lead to any comic book movies. Like I said, you know, you had these like weird offshoots like the aforementioned The Shadow and The Phantom, but it's like, why wasn't Marvel hot on their heels? Why wasn't DC going, all right, we've got to get the next Superman movie out of the gate? It just didn't happen. It was bizarre. So you ended up with something like The Crow getting made instead.
They tried though, didn't they? I know they tried, like, because Marvel was losing money at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So they sold off a bunch of the film rights to different studios. And they've been trying for years, because the bigger story is Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, again in 1994. Mm-hmm. He was about to lose the filming rights back to Marvel. Mm-hmm. So he made the film, knowing that it was like not Roger Corman, sorry, the producer got Roger Corman to make the film, knew the film was going to be shit.
Yeah.
Knew he wasn't going to release it, but the actors didn't know. So the actors are all doing this serious Fantastic Four film. Mm-hmm. It's on YouTube. Watch it.
It's rough.
It is rough. So so they made this film on a shoestring budget just to keep the rights. So everyone was trying to do it, but I don't think a lot of the fantastical elements of comics you couldn't at that point relay to film, and I think that's where they were struggling. I mean, Batman's different. You put a rubber suit on Batman, he's got gadgets. You can make that practical.
Yeah, but they had done, I mean, it's all relative. I mean, they had done Superman in 1971.
Yeah, but Superman again is just flying. Superman again is just flying, and the laser eyes and things like that, but it's...
Yeah, but if you can do Superman, you can find your way around. I mean, the fact of the matter, it's just, I still find it strange that they didn't try to do more with comic book kind of franchises.
Look at the 1970s Captain America or the 1970s Iron Man and tell me why they didn't do it.
Yeah, but because they had no budget.
But
like, you know, you saw when even in the 70s, when you had real talent, like, you know, it had Brando, obviously Christopher Reeve, and you had like genuine talent behind the camera and a budget with Richard Donner. It's like, even if you go back, sure, some of Superman like creaks pretty bad now in terms of the special effects, but it holds up because fundamentally it's well made.
Yeah, no, you know, I totally agree with you. But with Superman, Batman, they are well made, and I totally agree with you that they are good. Well, I say good films. Batman doesn't hold up for me. We've already had that discussion in the previous episode.
Yeah. I mean, you're wrong, but it's fine.
But there's a lot of things you can't do with practical effects back then. And Iron Man obviously was one of them, things like that. But they did do, Captain America in the 90s as well. But after Batman, they did a 90s version of Captain America. It turned like a made-for-TV film. But
it was garbage.
Yeah, again, it was garbage, but people weren't actually clamoring for...
Yeah, well, no, they weren't, but it was like, that's a perfect example of making a dog shit Captain America. It's like, there's no reason why they couldn't have made Captain America.
Hang on, dog shit. 13-year-old Rob had that on VHS, and he watched that quite a bit.
Oh, don't get me wrong, I watched that when I was a kid as well, and it is truly terrible. But, I mean, they were making a Hulk TV show in the 80s. Like, they could have done the Hulk, they could have done Captain America. I'm not saying, you know, like Iron Man, we only talk about Iron Man now because it was such a big hit. Iron Man was always a B or a C tier character. You know, they could have done Spider-Man, and obviously they probably made sense with Spider-Man, and they waited until the 2000s for the effects to catch up. But anyway, it was strange that they didn't, but it did end up, you know, we did end up with movies like The Crow, which obviously probably got budgeted as much as it did because of Batman. But yes, it is uber gothic. to the nth degree, but it's also so 90s. Like, I mean, I was watching this film, and especially the flashback scenes when the lighting's all kind of red, like overly saturated with color. And I said to my wife, I was like, Jesus Christ, every like flashback scene looks like a music video. And of course, I checked Alex Proyas's IMDb. What was he doing before this film? Music videos.
Yeah.
And I mean, sorry,
there was another reason for that. And I'm sounding like a crow and an Alex Proyas apologist at this point. But he originally wanted it to be like the comic. So he wanted the film in black and white.
Yeah.
The flashbacks in full color, like the comic.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Because the studios wouldn't let
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. But because the studios wouldn't let him do that, he had to do something else with the flashbacks to make them different. And that's... I appreciate that. Yeah, they do look like, again, a 90s music video.
And it's just got that classic thing from the 90s where there's a certain lighting where everything from the 90s reminds me of Losing My Religion by R.E.M. Just everything from the 90s reminds me of that music video. And this has the same vibe. And even like, I'm not sure if you remember that video, Sleepless Satellites by Tasmin Archer. It has that kind of vibe as well. And I mean, the soundtrack is so unbelievably on the nose. Like, it's got every band you think is going to be on the soundtrack is on the soundtrack. The only one who wasn't on there was Smashing Pumpkins. It was to the point where I was convinced that I'd heard Smashing Pumpkins while I was watching the film. They're not on the soundtrack. They just feel like they should be on the soundtrack so much that my brain convinced myself that I was hearing the Smashing Pumpkins. It's insane.
So have you got the sound? Because I got it by here, and I can give you a couple of bands.
Oh, yeah, I mean, was it The Cure, Stone Temple Pilots, Nine Inch Nails?
Machines of Loving Grace, Violent Femmes, 9 Inch Nails. Of course, 9 Inch Nails are on this thing.
Of course. Pantera, Rage Against the Machine. Yeah. It's every band you think is doing the soundtrack for this film, is doing the soundtrack for this film, with the exception of the aforementioned Smashing Pumpkins. But yeah, it's aggressively early to mid-90s, this film. Like, everything about it.
It's grunge. The only all right.
So grunge.
You said about Smashing Pumpkins. They're also missing Nirvana as well. If you want, yeah.
Maybe that would be a bit too much on there, especially what happened to Brandon Lee, which is amazing that we've not mentioned him yet. Because
I figured that we were going to get to that, and that was going to be a big conversation for this. So we try and squeeze everything out, but before we get to Brandon Lee, but if we want to get to him,
I mean, it's one of those weird.
The same with Heath Ledger. We'll stay with this. They tragically passed away, and their final performance, the final full performance, is classed as their best performance. Like, Brandon Lee gave his career performance in this film. Now, don't get me wrong, he did a film with Powers Booth previously before this. I can't think of the Rapid Fire. He did Rapid Fire, which is a great film. He also did, which he's probably known for before Crow, which was Showdown in Little Tokyo.
That's what I knew him for, with Dolph Lundgren. Yeah.
And it's got the infamous "You have the biggest dick I've ever seen" line by Brandon Lee to Dolph Lundgren.
It's not the best film in the world, but it's fun. But, you know, it probably showed a bit of promise. Like, oh, maybe this guy's got something in a not fantastic film. But this film, as you've already alluded to, is the fact that this feels like his breakout film. Like, even with like Heath Ledger had already had a really impressive career before he got to the Joker. The Joker's his best performance, but he'd had Brokeback Mountain, 10 Things I Hate About You, Knight's Tale. These were, to different extents, like iconic performances.
You talk about Heath Ledger. If anyone gets a chance, please watch Two Hands. It's actually an Australian film with him and Brian Brown. And it has like Snatch-esque Lock Stock vibes to it, but it's a great little film from before Heath Ledger came over. So I know it's Brandon Lee we're talking about, but we've already mentioned Heath Ledger. If anyone ever gets a chance, please watch Two Hands. It is a great film.
I've never heard of it, so I'm going to watch it myself. But Brandon Lee doesn't have that back catalogue. But I mean, this has every element of like a proper breakout performance because one, he's fantastic in it. Two, it's so iconic. And it's not, you can, it's similar to the Joker performance with Heath Ledger. It's like, yes, it's become more iconic because of what happened subsequently, obviously, with them passing away. But, you can take the whole death thing out of it. This was always going to be an iconic performance, an iconic look. I mean, people aren't still dressing like the Crow in 2021 because he passed away. No, it's because he had such a timelessly iconic look. And you can see why everyone fell in love with him. I mean, he's so fucking handsome. He's so handsome. It's ridiculous. And it's like, you can see why like a generation of girls and some guys would have like fallen in love with him. Like he's all gothic, but he's like mad romantic. He carries around a guitar. It's, you know, my only issue with his character actually is like he has no regard for fire safety. The way he proposes to his wife, I mean, that was one of those moments which really showed my age. That flashback when he leads her up into the attic and there are so many candles. I'm like, wait, you're just asking for a fire here, dude. What the fuck are you thinking?
But it's ironic considering that they did a petition about the health and safety violations in that I was going to say flat, in the apartment anyway. The reason everything started is because they signed this petition about health and safety violations, and then he just goes and starts a potential fire up in the attic.
Dude, there was like, I get it. Like candles are quite romantic. Not when you've got like 72 of them. It was like, there was nowhere for her to go. It was just literally, it looked like a floor made of fire. I'm like, you're asking for trouble here.
She puts her head up. She moves quite quickly. Her hair flicks around, catches one of those flames.
Oh, it goes up. It goes up. And you're telling me in the early 90s, she hasn't got an array of products. It'll be covered in hairspray. That thing, her hair would go up in a second.
Yeah.
And this film ends very poorly. But yeah, to get back to Brandon, he's like really fantastic. And obviously, it's like, he plays the tough guy, you know, like he's convincing as the Crow, but he never loses that like emotional edge that he's got.
No.
And he's such a unique leading man in that regard. No
more so than two scenes. The first scene, looking for his engagement ring, because he's trying to impose his will on Gideon, but when he finds the ring, then it's the look in his face, it's the anger, it's the torment, it's the pain whilst he's holding her. And then when he's talking to Albright in his apartment. And he's like, oh, you've got your hat. It's the little comedy things with the drama, and there's like, oh, you've still got your hat on. I don't know what I am. You have a beer, smoke will not kill you. All these little nuances and all these little conversations that he's having with Albright, mixed in with the fact that he's just fed off 30 hours of pain from his... It's his ability to go between like genuinely kind of scary and imposing, you know, with like the makeup, the look and stuff, but then like totally disarming. As you say, that classic scene with Ernie Hudson, I can't get beyond the fact that it's Ernie Hudson, you know, where, like you say, he offers him a beer and he's just got that totally like charming, winning smile where, you know, regardless of what he's doing, the whole revenge story, and of course it helps that the bad guys are just the worst, but you're totally on board, which actually brings me to... like, you know, there's literally a scene in this film when he's so kind of in love and so kind of like emo that he just smashes up a guitar, despite the fact that he's dead. Like he's playing the guitar. I'm not quite sure what it's plugged into. It doesn't matter. It's all gothic and emotional. And the fact that, of course, it helps that he literally looks like a rock star. I mean, they've obviously gone for a look. He looks like Jim Morrison from The Doors. Yeah.
The only problem with that scene is that every time I saw him, rather than making me think of The Doors or the music, it makes me think of Jim Morrison in Wayne's World 2. And I'm watching this really gothic, emotional film, and all I can think of is Del Preston talking to Wayne about Jim Morrison. Didn't you find it a trifle unnecessary to see the crack in the engine's bottom? Yes, we did. And I'm like, I shouldn't be thinking about that when I'm watching The Crow. But yeah, it's definitely got a Jim Morrison vibe. He totally pulls off the gothic dead rock star look. I wasn't aware that it was a look before this. But yeah, like this movie, even though it does look half like a music video, that feels right for this film. Yeah, it's kind of aged in so much that it feels like a kind of what it is, a mid-90s movie. But I don't think it's to the movie's detriment at all. Like, there's no other movie like The Crow.
I still think it's a classic. I still think it's got rewatchability all the time. There's just so much in this. It's mad because there is so much in this film, but the way he dispatches the first four men, or first three men, sorry, because actually Skank puts up a bit of a... Skank gets away. But like Tintin goes down pretty quick. But what I love about that is just before he takes down Tintin, he's learning his powers. Powers, basically.
Yeah.
Like when he first comes out of the grave and he goes to his loft apartment and he jumps out of the window as he's reliving how he died. And then he comes back and his hands heal up. which for a 1994 film, we're on about effects, looks great.
Okay.
I didn't look well. It looks a bit dodgy after he gets shot in the hand, and it's the fake hand that comes up. But
yeah.
it's then as he's running across the buildings, he's seeing through the crow's eyes. He can see Tintin, and it was only this watching that I actually realised he's not landing in a skip, and he's not landing on a load of rubbish. He's literally landing on the ground. He does. Mm-hmm. He does basically an Assassin's Creed-esque eagle's dive.
Yeah.
And he smacks into the ground. Mm-hmm. But I always thought he landed on something. But then as you think about it, no, he didn't, because he can't die. And that's why he's laughing, because he's realised he can't die. He's just jumped.
Yeah.
Maybe 10, 12 stories, landed on the ground. And okay, I can't die now, so I can actually get my revenge. And then it's that brief little fight with Tintin. And he's got the upper hand again until anything bad is mentioned about Shelley. And this is, again, when the acting comes in with Brandon Lee. Because as soon as Shelley is mentioned, the pain, again, torment, the anguish, it affects him. And Tintin quickly gets the upper hand.
Well, it's one of those weird things with this film. It's like I wasn't even by the end of the film, I wasn't totally clear on what the Crow's powers were, for instance. And it's one of those things that might actually be kind of dwelt upon to one extent or another in the totally unsuccessful and largely lame sequels. But it, like you say, it was one of those, like, as far as kind of like power training, because it wasn't really a training. He was just finding out what he could get away with. You find out with him in the film, without it being a kind of traditional montage. And I thought it was dealt with pretty well. But I mean, the story of this film is actually pretty simple. And it was, when I was rewatching it, what it reminded me of most bizarrely was actually RoboCop. I was like, if you replace Robot Man with Man Crow, and they're both set in Detroit. It's a different take on Detroit, but it's basically, Man gets, obviously it's different in this because it's more linked in with his wife and the fact that she was horribly murdered and raped. But it's like they're both killed by a truly abhorrent gang. The guy appears to be dead, comes back with special powers, be it robot powers or crow powers, which both sound kind of weird when you say them out loud. And then most of the story is just him finding the gang and just killing them. And the strange thing in this film is that Top Dollar, and it's a name I find even hard to say, feels like disconnected from the gang. I just never know why he wasn't more of a Clarence Bodiger in so much that why wasn't it like Top Dollar was in the room with them? I feel like there would have been a bigger connection at the end of the film where it feels like he's killed all the gang guys and now it's just by chance he's kind of like got involved with Top Dollar. I feel like Top Dollar should have had like a closer relationship to the murder of he and his wife.
I may not have a business head to understand this. How is Top Dollar and the rest of that 90s mafia table making money from fires? Like, is it realistic? Like, I want you to set fires the day before Halloween because we're going to make a lot of money. Like, how does that work? So the reason why it turns out then that the Crow can go after Top Dollar as well is because Top Dollar cleared the building to be harassed by T-Bird's men.
Yeah. He is connected, but it's not quite the same, that's all.
No, it's not. But, I mean, what they've said is that nothing happens in that city without Top Dollar's say-so. Which, again, how has this guy got so much power, but he's just above a grunge club?
Yeah, the whole thing, I mean, I got to be honest, like, being a bad guy in this film looks very tiring. I mean, most, like you say, with the dancing, they're always up to something. In fairness, Top Dollar seems to be in charge largely because he seems to be a bit more chill. I know he gets a bit wound up and stabs people in the throat, but in fairness, if anybody is asking to be... sleeps with his stepsister. Yeah, I was going to say, that whole thing with his stepsister is pretty bizarre. And again, I'm not sure absolutely necessary, but whatever. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't know how burning shit up is making them so much money. Like you said, maybe it is a mafia thing that people just like, listen, if you don't give us the money, you know what we get like on Devil's Night? We like to burn stuff. If you don't want us to burn your building, you're going to need to pay us. That's all I can think. I mean, when you see movies like, obviously, to go back to Batman, sometimes you look at it and it's like, well, why would anyone live in Gotham? It's so crime-ridden. This film takes it to a whole nother level. And perhaps it's because you are seeing it in and around Devil's Night that it just looks worse. But I'm not sure if I've seen a more grim, like, movie city ever. Like, it's just, oh my God, why would anyone, like, it's always raining. There just seems to be crime everywhere. The only place I could compare it to is like Mega City 1.
Yeah.
Like, that's it,
Yeah.
you know, Judge Dredd style. But yeah, it's a strange place. And I
don't get its own ecosystem. So there's,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, I wanted to go into two things, and they're both pretty.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first one, obviously, the film was based on, I've already said, a comic by James O'Barr. The reason why James O'Barr wrote this comic was to portray his feelings, because he actually lost his fiancée in a road traffic accident.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about committing suicide and things like that, and he ended up writing this comic. Now, in the comic, they're actually killed, and yes, Shelley again is raped and beaten and murdered, but it's all on the side of a road before it goes into Detroit, and then Eric is brought back and he goes after them. And subsequent comics, then, not all written by James O'Barr, they're all different versions of a crow. So basically what the crow is the crow brings back somebody who's been wrongly killed. It's not always like for the love or something like that, but it's somebody who needs to seek revenge. Now, the films are all to do with, all three films are to do with a loss of a love. And we'll get that into Dan Legacy, because I've seen them all. So
yeah, somebody had to.
Yeah, and it probably was only me for the Edward Furlong one. But
I think it might be. I think it might be, dude.
We'll get into that again. The second thing I wanted to mention, because we haven't actually mentioned it yet, is the tragic passing of Brandon Lee in this film.
Yeah, it's weird, because I was rewatching it with my wife, and when we were both of the impression that he had got accidentally shot when doing the rooftop chase with like the helicopter and stuff.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the story that was doing the rounds when we were younger. Everyone, like, somebody has said that, and everyone, obviously this is before most people had the internet, and everyone's gone like, yeah, I'll run with that forever. And it's just like, it spread like wildfire, and everyone just shimmed that. But the scene was actually the murder scene with he and his wife, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was Michael Massey, Fun Boy.
Yeah.
So basically what happened was, again, because on a budget, and they couldn't really... because they're on a budget, and the gun master went home for the night, and it was somebody else sorting the guns. Basically, you have two versions of a blank. You have the blank that gives the bang, and then this. I don't know the full technical details of it, but basically, what happened was,
well, it's the dummy versus the blank.
Yes, and
the dummy, and then the blank is the one that makes the sound. So they shoot twice, one to get the visual and one to get the sound.
Yeah, and they didn't clear the dummy, the projectile.
Yeah.
So when Michael Massey shoots, because he's been told the gun is safe, actually he doesn't get shot with a bullet, he gets shot with shrapnel.
Yeah, it's a little bit. They hadn't cleared it out properly, so it was just like a tiny bit, and it hit him in the navel or something, didn't it?
Yeah, and they went to hospital, and after hours of surgery and stuff, unfortunately he passed away.
Because that was another thing. I think everyone, certainly when I grew up, and I don't want to get too into the details of his death, but it was like everyone thought that he just died on set, like he was shot and he died. But like you said, he went into surgery and he got shot in the navel, but it was just that horrible bad luck. Like it hit an artery, which is one of the ones that goes to your legs, and he ended up dying from that. And it's just like, you hear this story, and the more you go into the details, it's just like, oh God, it feels also avoidable. And you just think, again, one of these stories where what could have been those sliding, like over like such a silly error, like based on budget, based on the right person not being in the room when needed. And this like horrible tragedy happens. And, you really go back and watch this film and you think, this guy could have been one of the major, and this isn't hyperbole just because of what happens. You watch this performance and you're like, there is no reason why this guy couldn't have been and he's already got the Bruce Lee name. Yeah. He couldn't have been one of the biggest stars in Hollywood for like the next 10 years. I'm not going to say like he's going to be the next Brad Pitt or anything like that, but there's no way after The Crow, he doesn't go on to do a number. He doesn't at least get that shot. Like you like a bunch of actors, sometimes it doesn't work out. Like they make the wrong choices and they just have that one big movie and then it just goes away. But he would have at least had that opportunity off the back of The Crow. He would have had 2 or 3 big movies come his way where he was the leading man, the guy on the poster, the name above. And if those go the right way, then for the next 10 years, he's a major movie star, you know?
He is riding the coattails of this film into bigger and better roles. There's no doubt about it.
100%.
His death as well affected lots of people, I am positive, but no more so than Michael Massey himself, Funboy.
Yeah, well, it's got to be horrible for him because it's not his fault.
No, it wasn't his fault, but he quit acting for a while after it. I think it was a year or a couple of years. And even because he's unfortunately passed away now himself. But even like he was in an interview in 2012 saying that he still has nightmares about it. I mean, come on, you shot a guy.
Yeah. When you're not like, you can't even imagine. You're just like doing a movie and you just pull the trigger and you've just shot a guy at a point blank range and then he died. And oh my God, it must be truly horrifying. But the cool thing with this film, and sometimes it's like tonally, it almost feels, if you want to go to a morbid level, I suppose, it feels planned, like especially with like that final shot, where his wife comes back to like take him back to heaven or whatever, and like you're watching, like Jesus Christ, and like I don't want to say it feels planned because that feels like the wrong thing to say, but you know, if ever under such sad circumstances, if you were going to have like the perfect send off, like thematically for a genuine tragedy, this feels like it. You know, so at least, you know, and again, this is trying to put a positive spin on something terrible. You know, talk about going out on a high. You know, it's like you said, the best performances career. Everyone will just associate him with The Crow. And it's one of those things where The Crow, the character, the look, has definitely outlived the film. It's like, I think when most people think of The Crow, I don't think everybody, like, you know, you love the film. A lot of people have a lot of affection for the movie The Crow. But I think in popular culture in particular, I don't think it's the narrative of this film which is lived on. It's the look. It's like when people hear The Crow, they just think of Brandon Lee just looking fucking all gothic and cool with the face makeup. I mean, shit, Sting basically did a Crow impression for them, 15 years.
We would have covered that in Facts or Legacy because before that, Sting was like an Ultimate Warrior ripoff.
Yeah, totally was. But with a super blonde flat. It was almost like he was like, all right, I'm going to take the hair color from Hulk Hogan, but I'm going to make it a flat top because that's even more American. But I'm going to have the Ultimate Warrior's face.
And he was running, and Sting was like, and then there was a story turn where he turned dark and stuff, and then he would appear in the rafters with the long black trench coat, the white face paint, the black lines on it. Basically,
it was just the Crow.
He was the Crow. And he has kept that look today. The dude is like 62, still wrestling in AEW.
Yeah. He still looks badass. Yeah. It's just a good look.
And he has kept that look to today.
Yeah. And that is the thing, like you say, like you go to like Halloween parties and like that. There's all like, there's going to be somebody dressed as the Crow because you're like, if you can pull off the look, it's a hot look, man. It just looks cool. And that is the thing, as good as the film might be, as much as it might have held up, the one thing that's lived on beyond the movie, beyond, like nearly 30 years later, is that look, is Brandon Lee as this totally iconic role as the Crow. And it's at least there is that kind of very clear lasting legacy, and which shows no signs of abating whatsoever.
No, not at all. And the entire, the look of it, I mean, and that's actually attributed to Brandon Lee. Well, no, sorry, the look is attributed to James O'Barr. But the worn out is because of Brandon Lee, and we would have covered it in Facts as well. But the makeup was looking too. Brandon Lee hated the makeup at first because it was just looking too fresh. So he actually applied it every night before he went to bed.
That's a great idea.
And then woke up the next morning and it's a bit like it's gone and stuff like that.
Bizarre. It's see, you mentioned that, and that's another parallel with the Joker. Yeah. It's like that is one of the things about his take on the Joker specifically, is that he doesn't have this prestige. Like when you look back at like 89 Batman and Jack Nicholson, other than, towards the end and obviously when he gets the water on his face, his makeup is pristine. It's more like the 60s take, isn't it? Kind of thing. But then his, like you say, it's just like, it's on him all the time. It's like he never washes, he doesn't wash. It's just, he's got this makeup on his face in perpetuity. And that is one of the reasons that Crow looks so strong, because I think he's exactly right. If it was perfect, he would end up looking like a wrestler, like somebody in gear. But because it is kind of washed off, because it looks grimy like the city itself, it doesn't look out of place.
Yeah.
And he has that kind of unique physicality as well, where it totally works. You know, I don't think this film works if he's like 6'8" and absolutely hench. If it's like, you know, I'm not aware of like many other people that were up for this role, but you like from a physical perspective more than anything else, like he just feels absolutely perfect for this role.
Look at the reboot that they've been trying to do for ages, and I mean ages. There was a couple of names that were always attached to it. Luke Evans, the Welsh actor, he was going to do it for a while.
He wouldn't be a bad shot. But I love Luke Evans, man. I love Luke
Evans. He's fantastic.
He's the best.
He's a great actor. But then he moved on. Luke Evans said, well, the timing's not working, anything like that, because they can't get off the ground. Now, the problem with redoing this film anyway is you're remaking The Crow. It's going to be difficult. So, but then attached to it for a long time was Jason Momoa. And I don't think that fits.
I don't think it fits. Again, I know what they're going for in so much that he does look like a rock star. Like he has that look. Yeah. But because he's big and strong, it's like you say, like that bit where T-Bird sees the Crow for the first time. Yeah. It's like you just see him and you're just like, this guy just looks fucked up. Like, and what, you know, other than like the face paint and the fact that he doesn't give a fuck, you're like, why would I worry about him? Because he's not a massive guy. Whereas even if he's not wearing the face paint, if you're in an alleyway, even if you are a tough bad guy, if Jason Momoa walks around the corner and he looks like he wants to fight, you're like, man, I got my fucking game face on here. That guy is ginormous. Whereas with Brandon Lee, is like, I think the whole point is that under normal circumstances, he wouldn't look threatening.
He's not imposing at all.
Yeah.
There's no imposingness in him. There's no threat from Brandon Lee. I mean, no offense to Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee could kill me.
Oh, no. He's
you know
he's cut and he knows his shit. But if you saw him coming around the corner, he doesn't look scary.
No, not at all. And that's the thing. He just looks like some guy dressed up for Halloween, or as a lot of characters in this film thought, some sort of crackhead or smackhead. What was it? Crackhead. I can't remember what Gideon called him, but Gideon called him something as well. That was
that is the look. He looks, you know, he's wearing this stuff. It's all torn up because he's been shot and stuff. He's wearing this like ridiculous face makeup, and of course he's walking around like crime-ridden streets. Everyone's going to think like, why is this guy out here? He must be a crack addict. Nobody is thinking Jason Momoa is. You know, you're not getting that much protein into your system if you're smoking crack. There's no fucking way. Like I said, I get it to an extent. I can see why they've gone to Jason Momoa, sorry, because of the rock star look. But I just don't buy him at the other end of, because, I think one of the reasons that his performance is so beloved and why, in particular, like the girls we went from, is that he feels, I had the word that's up my tongue. Not emotional. God, I'll come back to it in a minute. I've just completely lost my train of thought. I do apologize.
While you're thinking about that then, what happened to the language in this film as well? Because there was a certain scenes where it looked like they'd been edited on script. Like when the coppers are in the car and they're having their coffee, and the car goes past, T-Bird's car, it's got the Crow in it, goes speeding. The copper goes, "What the crap?"
Yeah.
What the crap?
What the crap? Yeah, and again, that could be part of the fact that it was a bit of a rush. Maybe they didn't quite know tonally what they were going for. Yeah. You do get that back and forth. And again, because let's be clear, you're starting the film where it's unpleasant. And again, like to have that RoboCop parallel, like it's not as gross, obviously, the way he dies. Like he's thrown out the window. He's not kind of blown away like by a firing squad in the most gruesome way possible. But his wife is raped. And they do a lot of it from that first-person perspective. Yeah. Like even if you don't have the violence associated with it, it's unpleasant. There's no two ways about it. And it's almost like they can't quite decide, do we want to try and somehow push for a PG? Or I'm not sure if 12 existed in 1994. God, what film? No, I think it did actually. But I'm not sure if they like, all right, do we want this to be 15? Do we want it to be 18? And it's like they can, like you say, in this film, him saying "what the crap" feels out of place. Like,
yeah, because it was an 18.
Yeah.
On VHS, it was an 18.
Yeah, you can see why. And again, it comes back to those early shots. But equally, you can see that at some point they're like, oh, maybe we can make this a 15, perhaps. And by the way, the word I was looking for was vulnerable. Vulnerable. It just should have dropped out of my head. But that is one of the key parts of his performance, is that he is so vulnerable. It's like 1 minute he's there, he's walking down the street, and he's got the black on the face paint, and he's like staring down the bad guys. He's getting shot in the hand, but it doesn't hurt him. And he's a total badass. He's carrying a guitar because he's fucking awesome. But then all of a sudden, when he like breaks down, and like you say, he has these emotional moments about his girlfriend, and all those moments when you can see him like curling up into a ball, he does look genuinely vulnerable. You're not going to have that with someone like Jason Momoa, and I think not only is that his physicality, but again, it comes back to Brandon Lee's performance, that he does have that in his range. That in those moments, despite the fact that he's just killed a bunch of bad guys, despite the fact that he appears to be basically invulnerable, that when he does curl up into a ball, and you just like, you do almost want to put your arm around him and say, dude, it's going to be okay, man. It's going to be okay, because he does pull off that vulnerability, which I'm not sure a lot of actors in the same role could pull off.
Not at all. Speaking of performances, we've got to give credit to David Patrick Kelly, T-Bird, for carrying the scene that he had to, because unfortunately Brandon Lee had passed away, is his own death scene, is T-Bird's death scene, because he's talking to the Crow, who obviously isn't there. So he's carrying the whole line, because they can't have another actor. They've got another actor from behind who's doing the Crow in petrol thing, lighting, sending him off. But it's all David Patrick Kelly at that point, because there's no one else there. So he's talking, and then he has to answer it. He's like, "What do you mean a year ago? Oh, I know you. But we killed you. This is the really real world. There is no coming back. This is the really real. The emotion is just, and you wonder, is that in part as well because of losing Brandon Lee? Is he carrying that real emotion as well? Like there is
it must have been.
There is the real world.
They were going to just pack the film in, weren't they? They were just going to say, all right, this isn't happening. It clearly affected everyone on set. Obviously we're not there. We don't know like how close they all were. But the fact that they were like, listen, we're just going to pack this in. But it was his wife, wasn't it, who actually said, no, he would want you to finish this film. And that's why at the end of the film, they say it's for Brandon and Erica, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So it obviously affected everyone's set. And there's no way it can't, because he's so central to the film. Like, everyone, he's in most scenes in the film. It's like chances are, if you're working on that film, you've done scenes with Brandon Lee, and you don't know what kind of guy he is, but you watch it and it's hard to believe he was anything other than like charming, because he's got so much charisma on screen. It's hard to believe that he wouldn't off screen almost. But and I tried not to watch it this way, but sometimes in the back of your head, you almost, and especially when you're doing it for a podcast, and we are supposed to be picking the film apart to one extent or another, is to find those scenes where they've obviously had to work around the fact that he's not there. And I was surprised that, because I didn't notice that scene. I didn't know that wasn't Brandon Lee he was talking to. The only scene was earlier in the film, is when he goes back to the apartment. And there's a lot moving through. Yeah, and it's like a lot of shots from him behind, and you can actually see there's one slightly clumsy cut where he goes into the apartment, and it cuts to actually Brandon Lee, and you can see it's not him going into an apartment, it's him in the alleyway. Yeah. And it's one of those few bits, and then as soon as he goes back into the apartment, it's all shot from behind, and when you see his face, it's all under shadow. And then right at the end, the camera pans in, and it's on his face, and you can see that it's been not digitally added, but they've used special effects at the time. Superimposed, and that was, in fairness, the only time of the film where I truly noticed it. You can probably kind of pick apart certain scenes and go, oh, that might not have been him, but it's the only part of the film where I'm like, okay, that's not Brandon Lee. But it's credits to the film and to the director, the people working on it, that for the most part you can't tell. And, especially without, this isn't like Gladiator, where they were able to kind of digitally impose people's faces. They had to work around these things. And for the most part, I thought they did a pretty great job.
I mean, it may be crass to say, but I suppose it's lucky in a way as well. They had filmed like 90 or 94% of this film before.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So because, you've got to have enough film. Like, otherwise it would become... as soon as it becomes glaringly obvious, it's not a film anymore. You don't want to see it. Yeah. You can switch your head off. If you didn't know, put it this way, if you didn't know he had passed away and they'd had to, pull a few tricks towards the end of the film, if you were just watching this film out of the blue, you wouldn't know.
Which I didn't.
You would even that scene, you would think it was stylistic. You would just assume that, they've just shot the film with him and that's it.
When I first watched this film, I did not know Brandon Lee passed away, because I didn't know who Brandon Lee was. That was, yeah. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
watched it when it first came out on VHS in '94. So I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
So when it first
Yeah,
came
yeah,
out, I was because I've already told you how I used to watch all my films. My mum would bring VHSs home after her night shift and stuff, and I'd
yeah.
watch them after school. And yeah, so I had no idea. I just watched this film and I grew attached to this film. And then later on, you find out everything about
It's it's weird. Well, I guess like maybe it's like your other thing, but I remember being aware of it before watching it, and it's one of those films like I don't have that attachment to it. Like I watched it a few times when I was younger, but I hadn't seen this film for ages. And it's quite bizarre because my wife does, and like out in the hallway, we've got a Crow poster. Like so, you know, and I had it on DVD, but I was like I hadn't watched it for so long, and I remembered bits of it, but not the entire movie by any stretch of the imagination. And I was again one of these films where I was a little bit worried. Going back and watching, I was like, man, is this going to be rough? Is this going to be a movie of its time? Because if you don't have that nostalgic attachment, I mean, again, that's part of what we're trying to do here with the podcast. Yeah. Without the nostalgia with it, does it still hold up? And the fact of the matter is, I don't have that nostalgia for this film. And it does hold up. Again, we've mentioned the fact that visually, in some parts, it feels a movie of its time. And that's part, you know, with the soundtrack, the music video style to the flashbacks, some of the special effects, you know, and while a lot of it's held up, there are a few scenes when it's like, all right, that's pretty ropey. But for the most part, this film is still very good. And it comes back to the idea that principally it's a very simple film. It's the same when you, like, I've already done the comparison with RoboCop, but another movie, if you go back and watch Blade Runner, this is another film with a lot of bizarre parallels with Blade Runner, because if you move beyond, you know, the sci-fi and the high concept stuff, is fundamentally it's Deckard chasing down 4 or 5 I don't want to say robots, what are they called? Replicants. I had androids, robots, replicants. So the structure of the film is the same as this. It's somebody, you know, going and chasing down 4 people. And of course, they, you know, the reason they're doing it is different, but you're taking a simple premise and you're building something on top of it to make it unique, rather than just it being a standard revenge thriller or a standard kind of chase thriller kind of thing. But yeah, these films, they take a simple premise and they make something special out of it by adding that extra layer of something visually unique. And that's what this film has more than anything else, I'd say.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you on that.
And that is, sorry, just before we move on, because I know we're going to wrap up the film in a minute. We've talked about those parallels with 89 Batman so many times. I mean, they really hit the nose on the head. I mean, this film is so gothic. It's like it had to end in a church.
On the top of a church? That's where I was going.
And I was like, dude, is it? Because I couldn't remember. I was like, he's going to fall off the church like the Joker, isn't he? Yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. In fairness, a lot of people fall off of shit in this film. But I was like, there was no way he doesn't fall off the top just like the Joker. And he's got the flair for the dramatic, just like the Joker. The full works. It was a little on the nose, that finale.
Can we also mention, though, how gothic this film is, that even the weather vane is in the shape of some sort of sword.
Oh, yeah, dude, it's so gothic. It's ridiculous. And it is grim. It's grim gothic. That's what it is. You know, because 18, again, we keep mentioning 89 Batman, that's gothic, but it's not any way as great. That's more fantastical.
Yeah.
This, with the constant rain and the grime, it's a grim watch at times.
Top dollar as well. Again, we go back to performances. As he's talking, like he thinks he's beaten Eric Draven. He's got him there, and he's going there. And he goes back to, he's so eloquent as he's speaking.
Yeah.
He's like, nothing happens in this city without my say-so, so I'm the one that gave the order. So I'm sorry about that, my friend. If it's any consolation, you have put a smile on my face. Like, I kind of like it. And he said, and then Brandon Lee's like, oh, I've got something for you, 30 hours of pain. And then he lands on a gargoyle, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, and it isn't, again, like you said, with this film, where you're not quite sure tonally what they're going for. With like some of the violence, some of the swearing, it seems to swerve back and forth. There are 2 moments at the end of this film which are super, super violent. There's the bit with Bai Ling, who's out of her mind, both in real life and as a character. Is it Micah? Micah?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Whatever. She's got like a legitimately gruesome death scene where the crow like pecks out her eyes. Yeah. It's fucking horrible. And then, of course, you get top dollar. Not only does he fall off the top of a building, but he almost gets split in half. Like when he lands. It's really gross again. And there's just those 2 random bits of like high-level horror at the end of the film, which don't really fit in with the rest of it. It's a weird mix, and it's something that can often happen for a film which is being rushed in the way that it was, where you do end up with these like tonally inconsistent films, but oddly in their own way they work. But yeah, it is bizarre that you have those two outrageously gruesome deaths. That's what they get for like their incestuous relationship, I suppose, is the most gruesome deaths in the film.
Obviously, it was a lot of foreshadowing with Micah as well, because she kept going on about eyes, cutting people's eyes out. I like the pretty eyes, things like this. So if you're going, there's only one way you're going, and that's you're losing your eyes.
No, that was all pretty grim, but at least it's offset by, you know, that final scene where apparently all girls in heaven wear really sexy nightwear. You know, when she comes to get him, and
blowing
it's like,
through the
it's like it's all grim, it's all dark, but then she's got the white sexy lingerie to come and fetch him back to heaven, because everyone wears sexy white lingerie in heaven. So at least you had that gruesomeness offset by the sexy girlfriend in the white lingerie at the end. So there was the happy ending in the end. So. But
should we move on to facts?
Go for it. We've done quite a few, but go for it, dude.
Yeah, okay, so like you said, we've done quite a few. I got a few more. So I've already mentioned black and white. I've already mentioned...
By the way, you didn't mention it at the time, but now that you've mentioned it, it almost feels like a shame. Like if you remove that kind of 90s tint and you just had the stuff in Detroit with him and the Crow was in like stark black and white, and then the flashbacks were just in color, and that's it. It would be such a great look for this film. And you look back and you're like, could somebody pull that off? Could someone re-edit this? Obviously, you could do the black and white bit, but I wouldn't want it to be the garish colors, just to be in color. Like as I mentioned earlier, the Wizard of the Oz style. I think that'd be an absolutely fantastic look for this film, and it's a bit of a shame. Sorry to derail.
No, because they did it with Logan, didn't they? They did the black and white, and with Mad Max Fury Road. You've actually got
Justice League.
Yeah, you've got black and white versions of them, and tonally, it gives you a different feel of these films, a different vibe.
Yeah.
But with this already, you would definitely feel more of a gothic tinge. And we've mentioned gothic so much because that's where it is. But
it's hard not to.
You would definitely feel more of a gothic tinge on it. But
I just think stylistically, I think it would look great.
Yeah,
I think it'd look great.
But I fear, like the studio fear, that it
gets a bit artsy.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same reason that for all of our talk, those films didn't use that. Like, if you can do it in the right way with technology, obviously with Wizard of Oz, it was to show off the technology of the time. It was to say, oh, look, suddenly we're in color. And another film which did it, not with color, but with 3D really successfully, was Tron Legacy. Because the opening scenes when they're in the real world, it's all just in 2D.
Yeah.
And the 3D doesn't kick in until he actually goes in to the mainframe.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do it, like, it's just like, whoa, dude, this fuck. And you almost think, like, if you hadn't seen The Matrix before, if it was your first 3D movie experience, that would have been absolutely amazing. So it's a bit of a shame, but I get it. There's a reason that Mad Max wasn't initially shot in black and white. There's a reason that Justice League was shot in black and white, because it's just a little bit too niche. Yeah. That's why there needs to be a special edition version of this film. But hey-ho, it is what it is.
Right, so according to James O'Barr, he didn't like casting Brandon Lee as the main lead for his comic book adaptation. At that time, he had only seen him in 1991 Showdown Little Tokyo and feared it would end up like a kung fu movie and go straight to video. But he was thrilled when he first met Brandon on the set with the makeup and the Crow outfit. He was amazed by Brandon's take on the character when he spoke the exact lines from the comic.
Mm-hmm. So that's really yes. Didn't he supposedly they wanted Christian Slater or Johnny Depp? Yep. Which, let's be clear, sometimes you hear about these alternative castings. You're like, oh, dude, that sounds terrible. Like mid-90s, Christian Slater and Johnny Depp, you're like, yeah, they're pretty good alternatives. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm very glad it was Brandon Lee, despite what happened. But they're not bad alternatives.
Second week in a row, we've mentioned that the alternative casting of Christian Slater would have been good as well. Because he was Crispin in Kindergarten Cop,
Yeah, he's another one of these guys where you're just like, he just never quite had, obviously he was massive for a few years in the early 90s, but there's like, I just feel like there's this alternative universe where he's an absolutely massive star because he just never quite kicked on. And again, it can be poor choices, whatever. But Christian Slater for a few years, man, he was like, he was one of the leading stars.
Christian Slater in 1994 was doing one of my favorite films ever, which was True Romance.
Yeah, he was shit hot in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Hey-ho.
At around the 26-minute mark, according to John Polito, who played Gideon, Brandon Lee cut himself when he broke the glass in Gideon's shop. The glass was breakaway glass, and it is very, very rare for anyone to get cut by it. Polito said that he told Lee that he feared Lee would die in an on-set accident, like Vic Morrow did during the filming of Twilight Zone, the movie. Unfortunately, Polito's prediction turned out to be true. So it's Polito's fault, really.
It is Polito's, or it could be, as you say, there was one issue which was like the funding, like that was in a rush. But supposedly this shot had a lot of cocaine, like a lot of cocaine.
That's my next, because you said like 80% of stuff is cocaine. This is actually my next fact. According to Empire magazine, cocaine abuse was rampant on set, with cameramen shooting whilst high, crew going into the toilets to snort between shots, and people cutting around. One crew member recalls hearing the sound of a sneeze on the set one day, and an annoyed Brandon Lee quipping, "Somebody just lost $50."
That was almost perfectly timed. Yeah. Halfway through that little story about cocaine, you did actually just go, and just like, you can't see on the video, but you did wipe your nose as if like, wait, am I doing cocaine? This feels like I could be.
Well, I am currently sat in Spain, which the cocaine boom in the 80s was quite high over here, wasn't it?
Yeah. But hey ho. But no, it does make for a different vibe. And again, maybe one of those things that can answer for the inconsistent tone of this film was just an array of cocaine.
Yeah. During the first day of shooting in Wilmington, North Carolina, a carpenter suffered severe burns after his crane hit live power lines. On subsequent days, a grip truck caught fire, a disgruntled sculptor crashed his car through the studio's plaster shop, and a crew member accidentally drove a screwdriver through his hand. Like, Jesus Christ, what was going on with this film?
I know, right?
With his profits from the film, James O'Barr bought his mother a car and a surround system for himself, then donated the rest. I was really good friends with Brandon, so it just felt like blood money to me, he said at Comics Convention 2009. I didn't want to profit at his expense, and I kept that secret for as long as I could. It's not charity if you get credit for it. So, I mean, fair play to that.
Yeah, totally.
Right, I got my last one, but it's really long. But I wanted to mention this because I was a little bit disappointed that this was... I saw this film before I read the comic, but when I read the comic, I was a little bit disappointed that this wasn't in the film.
Yeah.
So before Brandon Lee passed away, there was a plot line being filmed that involved a character called the Skull Cowboy. The backstory of the cowboy was that he was someone who was in a similar position to the main character at some point in time, but who failed to obtain his own revenge and now acts as a guide to all the souls who are stuck in the land of the living like he is. Whether the cowboy failed to obtain his own revenge or failed to return to his grave after obtaining said revenge is unknown. Yet the point of his character was to know the rules of revenge that all souls must follow, if they want to cross over to the other side. In deleted scenes, the cowboy would constantly warn Eric Draven if he did anything outside of seeking revenge against his killers, that he would lose his powers and risk being stuck in the land of the living as a lost soul. One deleted scene glimpsed this plotline when Eric used his powers to remove morphine from Darla's veins, an act having nothing to do with seeking revenge for his murder. After doing so, Eric temporarily lost his powers in that moment, was attacked from behind, and could not heal his wounds like he could before. The original narrative would have explained Eric's vulnerabilities in the final church fight more clearly, as his killers were already disposed of, and he was taking up action for something seemingly not related to his murder. The idea of the main character's powers were only being available to him based on the health of his companion crow was decided as a replacement movie concept much later. In his Blu-ray commentary for this movie, director Alex Proyer stated that this plot was let go before Brandon passed away, while write-ups from behind-the-scenes production books, most notably by Jeff Connor and Robert Zuckerman, state it was let go after Brandon had passed.
Yeah.
Now, there are some scenes of the Skull Cowboy, if you look on YouTube, telling Brandon Lee what to do and he looks great. He was played by Michael Berryman, who was most famously known as one of the, I guess, freaks from The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah, I know the guy,
Yeah.
It's a shame because it's a great concept. And as you say, it would actually better explain the loss of powers at the end, because I always thought the stuff with the crow getting injured felt slightly wishy-washy, and because it was slightly wishy-washy. Yeah. And that is a much better explanation. And as I said, like, one of the things watching this film is that his powers, or the fact that they come away, they drop back, whatever, isn't always crystal clear in this film, which isn't a massive issue, but it just factually isn't. And a big part of that is the loss of this character and that part of the narrative where traditionally you would have somebody, basically as much for us as for him, laying out the rules of his powers in greater clarity. And that's obviously just completely missing from the film.
No, I totally agree. I do think that we should have just kept. We should have kept it, but whether or not they wanted to get rid of it after Brandon Lee because it was,
I think it was because they didn't have enough, and again, it was they already had a lot to work around, so that was the reason that it got removed from the film, which is fair enough. But it's just one of those things, like the other stuff in the film, you can work around, but from a narrative perspective, more than anything else, he definitely looked cool and stuff, but it would have probably made for a slightly more cohesive film.
Yeah,
but,
they do bring. They do bring the Skull Cowboy back, not for any of the sequels, but for the Crow Stairway to Heaven TV show starring Mark Dacuscus. Yeah. So he's in there more as a spirit guide.
It's just a great concept for a character as well. So it seems a shame not to use him.
That was me for facts, mate. That was a really long one for me to finish with, but that was one that needed sharing, I think, because you a better understanding of the movie.
I haven't got many others. I mean, they used ravens, not crows, for the film, because they're easier to train. But ravens don't actually stay up at night. They sleep. They sleep at night, stay up in the day. So they had to train them to work at night and to fly through the rain. So all crows. So instead of crows, they're just well-trained ravens,
which is ironic because Brandon Lee actually does the Raven line.
He does.
After the Gideon's Door.
Well, again, I was wondering with that, it's like, was he a fan of Edgar Allan Poe before he died? Or was it like he saw the look, it's like, I should probably learn some Edgar Allan Poe. It just
Edgar
looks
Allan
like
Poe is the classic goth. I mean, it's probably some Edgar Allan Poe, and he was reading some, oh my God, Into the Mouth of Madness and all. What was that character?
I know. It doesn't matter. We'll get there. I couldn't remember the word vulnerable, but I know who you mean. But it's although I'm such a Luddite, when I think of Edgar Allan Poe, I always think of the first Halloween special from The Simpsons, where Bart plays the Raven. So that's where my head goes. The only other one I've got is his stunt double after his death was actually Chad Stahelski. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he ended up being the director of John Wick. And they trained together quite a lot.
And Deadpool 2, wasn't it? He was.
Yes, yeah. But again, it's just one of those things where you can imagine, like, a similar age range. There's no reason that 20, 25 years later, Brandon Lee couldn't have been playing John Wick. He would have been an obvious choice. Like, build-wise, he's similar to Keanu Reeves. Obviously, he already had the martial arts skills and stuff, so a bit of a shame. In terms of legacy, obviously we've mentioned Brandon Lee's legacy. I don't think we need to go into that anymore. There's an array of dodgy sequels, which I think you need to go into a bit more than I, because I haven't seen any of them. I mean, legitimately, are any of them worth watching, or are they all dog shit?
No, so The Crow Wicked Prey, which was the main sequel after this in 1998, is probably one to go back and watch, because it kind of follows the same style. You have a father who loses his son. The father and son are killed by, again, another gang, drug dealers of another city. The father's brought back to life. He's brought back to life by the Crow to avenge for his son's death. He meets a tattooist who understands what's going on and is actually hinted to be an older Sarah from this film.
Okay, yeah.
Not named, but hinted at.
Yeah.
And a couple of good things about that film is that the main bad guy, then, the top dollar, if you will, understands the kind of voodoo practices that are going on, and he's able to gain the Crow's powers. So you have a dark Crow as well. And it's done really well, shot really well. And what's quite good is when James O'Barr wrote The Crow, and if you see pictures of Eric Draven, he's basically topless, and he based his torso on Iggy Pop.
Okay, yeah. It's a very distinct torso.
Yeah, who is one of the bad guys in The Crow Wicked Prey. Not Wicked Prey. City of Angels. Please, I said Wicked Prey. Please, nobody watch Wicked Prey. City of Angels.
Okay, yeah. So I had no idea you were wrong, because I've not seen any. All I'm aware of is the one with John Connor. That's it.
Yeah. So The Crow, City of Angels, and then the third one then is Salvation, where the the boyfriend is accused of killing the daughter, his girlfriend, so he is electrocuted. He gets his crow makeup because of the mask that they put on.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
his face melts into the crow.
Yeah, brilliant.
He comes back. It's a bunch of corrupt cops. Famously, Walton Goggins is one of the corrupt cops.
In the that's pretty
film.
Cool. Is it pretty bad though? The third film, I assume.
It's okay. It's Kirsten Dunst as well. She's
really?
She's the sister of the murdered.
Girl.
So
so there's a bit of talent in there at least.
It's all right. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's going down in levels.
Yeah. And they often do, don't they?
It's like great. City of Angels is an okay sequel. Salvation is an okay-ish sequel. It's not the best.
Yeah.
Wicked Prayer is dog shit.
Even the poster, I was just like, oh man, really?
So
like, look at the cast.
Edward Furlong is, again, so you have a satanic cult led by David Boreanaz. His missus is from American Pie films. Tara Reid.
Yeah.
The rest of his gang, you've got like Tito Ortiz is
obviously
Famine. You've got a Guy War. You've got Pestilence.
It's not bad from a conceptual standpoint, I suppose.
But no, they've just been named those. They've got no.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They'd have nothing to back that up. And plus, I mean, he just doesn't look right. Edward Furlong. Like, you know, if you want to talk about the importance of, again, screen presence, of looking the part, which Brandon Lee does, you only need to look at Edward Furlong and just be like, oh, yeah, this is what the Crow could have been, you know? Not great.
David Boreanaz, I think he plays like Luke Crash. I think that's his name in the film. And then they kill Edward Furlong and his missus as part of a ritual so he can get satanic powers. Then the Crow brings it back. But what's funny about that last film is the fact that it's Danny Trejo, which that isn't funny. Danny Trejo will do anything. If somebody offers him a film, he'll take it, which is great. Dennis Hopper.
Jeez Louise, he's in it?
Macy Gray.
Fucking, what a cast. Yeah. What a bizarro cast. Yeah. Who's available? Get him in.
I would appreciate people to watch this film, but you don't have to. Like, it's dog shit.
No, it's one of those things. Again, like, what I'm going to, and I should have done it ahead of time, but I was like, no, let's leave this to Rob. He knows what he's talking about. It's like, now that you've talked about it and you said he was in it, I'm like, I'm going to watch the trailer. Yeah. Like, you know, I'm definitely watching the trailer just to see how mental this looks. But I suspect, as is the case with a lot of these straight to DVD, straight to home video, whatever you want to call it, movies, is that I don't need to watch the whole thing.
No.
And I can assure you, I'm not going to.
And of course, famously, there's a 20-episode TV show called Stairway to Heaven, which is Mark Dacascos as Eric Draven. So basically, it goes back to Eric Draven, and you've got the gang again. You've got Top Dollar. You've got all these guys, and you get a TV movie to start off with about how he dies and how he gains his revenge, and then it goes on then, and it's not killing the gang over 20 episodes. He kind of dispatches with them pretty quickly, but then he's given a mission by Shelley to help ferry other souls for a while. Before he can go back. You can
see why it's, you know, again, I don't really want to go back and watch any of these things, but you can see why people and you've already mentioned the fact that obviously they've been trying to get a remake off the ground for ages, is because it is a great concept. Like, visually, it just looks cool. It's a simple concept to get your head around. You're like, listen, like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do this film. I think the big issue is the whole, well, I was going to say the issue is the Brandon Lee thing, but they've obviously, you know, kind of ignored that for years with these sequels and obviously with the TV show in particular. But that's different to doing like a big budget and kind of, you know, you would think if someone was going to do a remake now, they would put some serious money behind it. And I think you would have to there'd be so much news around who was going to play, especially if you're going with a direct remake. So, you know, let's say Eric Draven, is that they would have to get that lead right that would be the big part of it. But,
and I guarantee you, if Brandon Lee didn't pass, then it would have been a sequel with Eric Draven somehow.
Oh, and to be clear, there would have been a sequel with money. You know, it would have 100% got a sequel, but no doubt.
Like, the Wicked Prayer is decent. It is a decent follow-on. It's not as fantastic as the first one, but it is a decent follow-on. But if it was Brandon Lee, it would have been a whole different story. But these films are following on then from the comics in regards to not directly, but the comics. Every other version of the comic is a different person, as I've already said, brought back by a crow.
Yeah.
So the films have tried to match that, but they've never been able to match the style, or they've just never been able to match the first one.
Yeah, well, again, speaking of legacy, one of the stranger things, because this film is visually quite striking, and I think it's a well-directed film, is the bizarre career of the director, Alex Proyas. I mean, we already mentioned the fact that he was doing music videos before this, which is quite clear in
another
stylistic
one that he did was Dark City. That was...
Yeah, that was something. I mean, he's got some strange films on his CV. I mean, he did I, Robot, which was a pretty big film, in fairness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love it, but it was a big film. Nope. Then he did Knowing, which was absolutely batshit crazy. And it's like, well, how do you go crazier than the Knowing? I know.
That was the Nick, sorry, before you go on. That
Nick
was
Cage
the
one.
Cage, Aliens are telling me how to survive thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. That film is fucking bananas.
Yeah.
But of course, it pales in comparison to the sheer lunacy of Gods of Egypt, which I can only assume has absolutely derailed his career, which is a film where the trailer isn't going to cut it. I would suggest, because it came up on Netflix a few years ago, I'm not sure if it's still on there, I would say give that film 20 minutes, because it is so bizarrely and uniquely bad that you just have to watch it. You really have to watch it. The kind of characters that they have playing quote-unquote Egyptian gods is it's the whitest cast of all time for a start.
You just need to watch, and the fact that it's got like Gerard Butler in, but the fact that the gods then are kind of like Power Rangers.
Yeah,
but they can have they have something else. But you say that, so after Gods of Egypt, then he's done.
And do you know how much? Just to be clear, like there was so much money put into that film. Like that film cost so much money. It was like a $200 million budget. It was insane.
And it's a 2 hour and 10-minute film. It's just.
It is one of the great follies of modern cinema. And like I said, I'm not going to suggest anyone watch the whole film, but definitely, if you get a chance, if it's on one of the streaming services and it's there in front of you, give it 20 minutes. You know, it's worthy of that much for sure.
That film was 2016. He hasn't been able to direct anything then until 2019, and he's done 3 things in 19, 20, and 21. They're all short films. So he did a 12-minute called Phobos, 7-minute film called Strange Nostalgia, and a 20-minute film called Mask of the Evil Apparition. So I think he's trying to prove that he can still do some stuff. But I'm guessing nobody's learning.
This is what happens. It's like if you're given the keys to the castle, if you're given that $200 million budget and you make a film that bad, that poorly received, that loses that much money, it's often tough to kind of get your foot back in the door. So that might be what happened. But
so, I mean, I think we clear if we're done with legacy.
Yeah. Well, beyond we've already mentioned the look, the Halloween clothes, the music, and everything. So it's fine. Yeah. And
we've clearly covered soundtrack.
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate alt rock soundtrack of the early 90s. So yeah, I think we've covered that.
So the only other thing then is my favorite thing to listen to, and because unless Naughty Dog do it, we go.
Yeah, of course.
Is because this didn't have a video game, I don't think. So.
No, it did. Funny enough, named after one of the films. There was a game for the released in 1997 for the Sega Saturn and the original PlayStation called The Crow City of Angels.
That one had a sequel. Oh, that one had a game.
No. They just took the name. It's very much based on the original film. Okay. They've just taken the name City of Angels. But on the cover, it was kind of marketed as a 3D fighting game with a vengeance. It was by a developer called Grey Matter, who I don't know anything about, but like a lot of early 3D fighting games from that era, it looked rough. It played rough in 97. It's aged, I can only assume, horribly. I had a look at a video. I was like, okay, nobody wants to be playing this. But I do find it bizarre that that's pretty much the only video game based on an inherently very, very video gamey kind of IP or premise. Yeah. So it was a bit strange. And I know it's very on the nose, but of course, my big thing is like, well, if someone's making a Crow game today, I mean, there's only one answer, and it's Rocksteady. It's, Rocksteady did such a great job with Batman, and their version of Batman in particular, you think of Gotham City and stuff, it is that they really lean into the Gothic elements in those video games. So it already looks the part. So yeah, The Crow, I'm thinking The Crow, same style, made by Rocksteady. The only difference is it has an array of Guitar Hero-esque mini games where you have to do the buttons and you have to do the music kind of thing. So, instead of a Batmobile, you have Guitar Hero kind of bedded into the game. But yeah, I know it sounds lazy, but I'm like, dude, it has to be Rocksteady making the Crow take on the game.
I sound like I'm riding your coattails here because I would have done the same thing. Because I was thinking, because you're Rocksteady and you've got, like you said, you've got the Arkham Asylum game and Arkham City, and you could do it. You've got four mini bosses and then top dollar, so you could actually set that out in the city of Detroit anyway.
And one of the things, like from a technological level, they always had to find excuses for why Gotham was empty. Like there's no pedestrians around. It's just all criminals, and it's Batman going into Gotham or Arkham Asylum, whatever, and cleaning house. With this, you've already got that with Devil's Night.
Devil's Night, yeah.
So there's an excuse why there's no pedestrians on the street. It's just the Crow, a bunch of criminals. He has to beat up the low level stuff, but like you said, the main thing is getting to fairness. Skank isn't exactly the Penguin. So there are those issues, and perhaps you could kind of go deeper into the comic book lore rather than it just being a direct take on the movie to kind of get more characters there. And a great thing would be to resurrect the cowboy fella. He would be a great addition to this game.
And for me, Skank would be the one that you're chasing through, and he somehow manages to just sneak away, and then you've got to deal with like Tintin, and then Skank appears again, and you're trying to chase him because he's in the film. Skank has this survivability that he shouldn't have.
He also appears to be borderline mentally disabled. But
that was another one of the lines. When Skank gets hit by that tiny car and that rather large gentleman gets out, grabs Skank and goes, "Look what you did to my car, you stupid asshead."
It's very strange. But yeah, I agree. I think Rocksteady with a couple of tweaks could absolutely make a Crow video game. As unlikely as it is, I think that'd be a great fit.
No, totally agree. 100% agree with that.
Cool.
So, all right, we've covered video game then. So the only thing to do before we move on to your choice next week is to rate it and recommend it. So for me, highly recommend it to others. I've always have. I've always said, and I'm using the word in these podcasts a little bit too much at the moment. Is for me, it's classic. But for me, this film is. I gravitated towards this film when I first watched it. I absolutely love it. I still do, and I would highly recommend this to others. It is a visual watch. A visual masterpiece. I know you said some of the things of it are pretty much 90s dated now. But I still think it's great to watch. I still think people will have a great time with this. And knowing what they were able to do then with the tragic passing of Brandon Lee. So I would highly recommend this to others. And this is a rare one for me. But for me personally, and I know we usually do it with review head and nostalgia head, but I can't get away from them. It's 5-star for me.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
5 stars. Jeez Louise. I don't think it's a 5-star film. I don't have the same attachment to it. I'm very much kind of reviewing it on how I feel about it now more than anything else. But saying that, I still think it's a strong 4-star film. I think it's really good. I think it's, it's very stylistic. Obviously, you have to go with the fact that to an extent, it's a movie of its time. But with that comes a certain unique charm. But so much of it is driven by that core central performance from Brandon Lee, which is absolutely fantastic. It's an iconic look, it's an iconic performance, and the film, without doing anything particularly new, is just really well made. I think it's just a really good, really enjoyable, visually, above all else, visually iconic movie. As I said, I'm not sure if the movie is what people remember so much as the visuals, the visual narrative of the film, of the city, of the Crow itself. Yeah. But you go back and watch it, it's a great watch now. So would I encourage people who hadn't seen it before? Yeah, it would come with a slight caveat of beware, this is this with the soundtrack, the music video stylings. Yeah, you have to get on board with that, but it holds up. It's totally charming in its own dark, grimy, gothic way. So yeah, I would encourage other people to watch it. 4-star movie. Great.
Well, I mean, so in a nutshell, or in an hour and something, that is basically The Crow. So,
yes.
What we'll do now then, mate, is we'll hand it over to you. Let us know what we're watching and getting ready for next week.
Yeah, well, with you're talking about a film that you grew up with, which had a massive attachment to. This is a film I did grow up with and had a massive attachment to in the 80s, and a film which has grown in prominence recently because of the outrageous numbers of series of the Netflix of what are we on to? Season 5 of Cobra Kai now?
Oh, Cobra Kai. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's a very roundabout way of saying we're doing Karate Kid next week. Nice. So because I was talking about this, and I started watching the Cobra Kai, the TV show, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'm on board with this. I feel like they got the tone right. But then I quickly realized I don't want to see 5 series of Cobra Kai. As good as it is, like it just feels like a movie, and it's the reason that the movie worked in the first place. So yeah, it seemed like a good a time as ever to go back and remind myself of why I love the original so much. So I haven't seen it for a few years. I'm assuming it holds up, but who knows? We'll see how it goes. But yeah, funny enough, if you're listening to this in the next couple of days, it's actually showing on Channel 4 at the moment. I think it's on Netflix anyway, but they are showing Karate Kid on Channel 4 at the moment. And we are talking very much about the Daniel LaRusso-based original, not the Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith one. Jesus Christ, we're not talking about that. We will get to that in Legacy next week. But yeah, Karate Kid, if you get a chance to watch it, as always, thanks for listening to this, and please join us next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Oh, yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review and leave us some 5-star ratings as well. But make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1-star. 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't move smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But yeah, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.